Hello, good afternoon, listeners and viewers, wherever you might be watching us all over the world, in Africa, Nigeria. Good afternoon once again. My name is Richard Babatunde Simeon, your regular host on Auto Talk R. How has our day been? Yeah, today we are on the business again, just as usual. On the business of automobile, where we talk, where we enlighten and sensitize ourselves on the maintenance and how to undo our automobile, and also to rescue ourselves from unwanted problems. So today, we'll be talking on a very important aspect of an automobile, a very important aspect of an automobile. Now, what is that aspect that we're talking on today? Today, I'll be talking on sensors. Sensors, as I call them, sensors. Sensors, we might be asking that sensor, what are the sensor? Basically, let me give you what sensor means in my own simple definition. Sensors are the eyes that are sensing a particular component, is either from unwanted uh, uh, unwanted distraction, or whenever there's miscommunication and sending the signal to an ECU or to a particular component of an engine. So that is what sensor means in my own simple definition. Sensor is an eye that senses, that sees every the movement of a particular thing, or that reports a particular issue that are not expected or that are not the way it should be to ECU. What is an ECU? ECU basically mean electric control module, which is also known as your uh, brain box. Your brain box. So now this afternoon, I am not going to dwell much on brain box. I want to dwell more on sensor and the types of sensor and their function this afternoon. Why are we treating this topic? Is because we realize that most of the modern day vehicles that are designed, especially the 21st century vehicles, they are full of sensors. Why? They are, like I said the other time, that they have mouths to talk. It's not that they have a physical mouth just like the one I am using to talk now, but they talk through some of these sensors. When these sensors sees things, they communicate with the driver or the owner. So that is why this afternoon we are going to be dwelling more on sensors and their functions. Now, the first sensor I'll be picking this afternoon, I want to start from the sensors around the engine. So, what are some of the sensors around the engine? We have the CKP sensor, that is the crankshaft position sensor. We have the camshaft position sensor. We have for switch, we have engine ECT sensor, which is a engine coolant temperature sensor. We have TPMS, we have a throttle position monitoring sensor. We have a throttle body sensor, and so on and so forth. So now, this afternoon, like I said earlier, I want to dwell more on the sensor. So I'm going to be picking them one after the other, while we'll be dwelling more on their functions and their importance, as it may be to it may be required of every vehicle. Now, this afternoon, the first one I'm going to be talking of is CKP. CKP means crankshaft position sensor. Crankshaft position sensor is usually placed under a vehicle engine component area. Why? Because it is a sensor that is sensing the movement of the timing and the crankshaft a crankshaft. What is crankshaft? Crankshaft is the major mechanism, a major mechanical component is in form of, is an iron, a complete iron that is rolling the engine, is very huge, and is so it has a sensor that is called CKP, that is crankshaft position sensor. Now we have another one that we call camshaft position sensor. Camshaft position sensor is or are the sensors that are placed underneath the engine. They are on the top. Remember, I said the CKP, that is the crank, is under, while the cam is up. Why? Is because both of them are communicating, they are sending signals to each other. How? We might be asking that why and how could that be possible? Yes, this is how they work. The crankshaft, like I told you, and the camshaft machines, we have the camshaft rod, the camshaft, and what we call the timing belt or the timing chain. They are the things that is holding through their sprocket. They have a teeth like sprocket like. So that is where the belt or the chain or whatever stay. So they are the one that is holding the belt or the chain. So now when the roll, when the one on the top roll, it communicates with the one that is under, and whenever their movement is like that, okay, so now your vehicle may never start. Why? If these two sensors lose communication. Why? Because number one, you need to get your timing correctly. So how do you get your timing correctly? There is a particular mark, that is a position where the crankshaft should be. That is, we have what we call, I'm going to go a bit mechanical, so permit me to do that because I'm going to be using some terminologies. That is, we have what we call top dead center, and we have BDTC, that is bottom dead center. So now bottom dead center is it has to do with the crankshaft, that is the crankshaft, which is the main component of the engine that is rolling the strength of the particular engine, where your metals, your rings, your connecting rod, your piston, and all of that need to key into. That is where they key into. So now the upper, that is the valves, that is the top cylinder, okay, communicate also with the camshaft. The camshaft are the ones that is pressing the movement of the valves as it is coming from the crankshaft. So at every rotation, a particular number of camshafts, that is, and the valves, they have a way of how they move. So now it is these sensors that are monitoring them as they move. So now without these sensors, they cannot communicate to each other whether the timing is accurate or not. So now the CKT sensor can make your vehicle to always crank and never to come on. So now, what do I mean by this? Because it's a major component, it's a major sensor that is what is, as your vehicle generates sparks, okay, it is the one that is taking the spark into that particular area in which it's sensing. So now that is why they are usually comes in form of a magnet. We call them magnetic inductance. They are magnetic inductant. They are magnet, as a magnet in nature. So now, so the camshaft and the camshaft, both of them communicate with each other. and without their communication, your vehicle can never start. And when one is over retarded, or one is slower, that is in timing, if the timing is not accurate, the sensor will definitely sense it. Why? Because by the time you are trying to crank the engine, it will not start. Why? It won't come up because the sensor does not sense it to be at a particular place where it should be. So now that is the way the camshaft and the crankshaft sensors are. They are both monitoring sensor. So they are monitoring the movement of your engine. So that is the way both of them works. Now I talked about the oil switch. Yes, oil switch is all usually uh communicating with the oil level. That is, we call them oil switch or oil level sensor. Oil level sensor basically monitors the amount of oil that is in your vehicle, or the amount of oil that comes from the bottom of your car and goes to the uppermost of the engine, that is the camshaft area. So now you'll be asking that, how could that be possible? Yes, it could be possible because of a particular mechanical component, that is the heartbeat. That is what we call the oil pump. Oil pump is the heartbeat of that particular uh, component. It is the one that pumps the oil from the bottom, that takes it from the pan and send it up or to every component of the engine where it should be. So now when the oil pump refuse to pump, your oil monitoring light sensors will pick the signal that, okay, is either is in low pressure or it doesn't even function well. If it is a modern day vehicle that are a bit more sophisticated, they will have what we call oil monitoring sensor. So what it will do, it will notify you that is either the oil pressure is low, or it doesn't even come at all. It will give you. But if it is the contemporary vehicle, that is the ones that just are not equipped to monitor that particular uh, 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 that particular thing. So what it will do is, you will see the oil light, that is the oil monitoring sensor, in form of a pan, in form of a tray. Okay, it will be blinking. So it will be blinking. So once it starts blinking, that should tell you that something is not right. Something is not right with it. So now what should you do when you see something like that? The first thing you need to do is, number one, you need to pull over. Pull over. Number one, check the quantity of the oil that is in your car. If the oil, if you gauge it, you check, you discover that it is enough. So what should you do? You need to call an expert. Let them check whether there is a deprivation of engine oil into all the required the necessary area which the oil should touch. So now we have another one that is called ECT, that is engine coolant temperature sensor. Now, what is the function of an engine coolant temperature sensor? Wow, this is very, very interesting. Uh, the function and of an engine coolant temperature sensor is a sensor that is monitoring the temperature of a particular vehicle. How? You might be asking that, how? Like I told you, we have two numerous types of sensors on vehicle. So I'm gonna be picking them as we have been picking them one after the other. Remember, we have talked about the crankshaft position sensor that I call CKP, and we talked about the camshaft sensor. We talked about oil switch or oil level sensor. So now I am talking on ECT sensor, that is the engine coolant temperature sensor. The function of an engine coolant temperature sensor is the sensor that is monitoring the temperature of a particular vehicle. You might be asking that, oh, I have it on my dashboard or on my instrument cluster. There's a gauge. Yes, you are correct. But that stick, that handle, or whatever, that signal that you are seeing on your instrument cluster cannot just function without a particular sensor, without a monitoring spirit that is monitoring that particular component or that area which is assigned, and sending the signal to the brain box, which is the ECU, and now feeding that particular guide, that is your gauge, your water gauge, or whatever you call it, and now disseminate the information back to you. So now the engine coolant temperature sensor is somewhere around the engine, on top of the engine. So it comes in two different there's one that we call engine coolant temperature sensor. We have the one that is monitoring the heat, that is the heater circuit sensor. Okay, so now both of these sensors, they are working together. Now the heater circuit sensor, whenever it is faulty, these are the signs that you will see on your car. So whenever the heater circuit sensor is not functioning the way it should be functioning, number one, that is when you will be experiencing hand starting. When you start your vehicle at a very lower temperature in the morning, your vehicle, it will take several cranking before your engine comes up. So why? It's because as a result of heater circuit sensor, or there's deprivation of fine. There are several things that can be responsible for that, but this is one of the most important area that we need to check. So now this is how to know whether your heater circuit sensor is bad. Number one, when you crank your vehicle several times before it comes on, and the moment it comes on and it gets heated up, you only crank it once and it peaks, you should know that, of course, your heater circuit sensor is bad. So you don't have any other area to go to except for that particular area. Why? Because in the morning, when your vehicle is still in a very cold condition, when you crank it, it doesn't really sense anything. Why? Because the engine, before immediately you crank the engine, your engine should get heated up immediately through that heater circuit sensor. So now the moment that guy could not sense this particular could not sense the heat and send it to the ECU and communicate with every other component that need that particular communication. So that is when you begin to crank. That is when you begin to experience what we call hand starting. So what do you do when you are experiencing this kind of a thing? It's very simple. Number one, you need to check the wiring harness of that particular component, because it's a socket. It has a socket. So check whether there's a socket, a wire, there's a breakage. So you need to check. Then all these sensors, they have their fuse direct to the main bus. That's your main component, your fuse box. So you trace it there. If the fuse is intact, so that means you need to check the wiring connection. If the wiring connection is intact, then remove the sensor. Check the sensor. When you check the sensor, there is a way you read it. Do your readings on it. Look at the resistance. When it gives you a required resistance, what should you do? You take it back and check properly that whether the socket is being disconnected somewhere, and your vehicle begin to function the way it should. But the engine coolant temperature sensor is the one that is monitoring the heat. When your vehicle is getting overheated up, so the engine coolant temperature sensor is the one that will send the signal back to you. That is what we now interpret on your dashboard, that you will see that, okay, now my vehicle is overheating, before you now pull over. So when you do that, it's telling you that there is a particular error somewhere. Now, when engine coolant temperature sensor is giving you a signal that your vehicle is overheating all the time, so you need to check there are a lot of things that could be responsible for that. Number one, it could be as a result of bad thermostat sensor. It could be because that bad thermostat is a sensor on its own, but is a mechanical sensor. Why this one is is an electrical sensor? Okay, so the thermostat sensor could not sense anything without being communicated with through the ACT, that is the engine coolant temperature sensor. So now this is the way they work. So whenever your engine coolant temperature sensor is telling you that there is a particular error, or is telling you that you always see overheating all the time. So now you need to understand that there are several things that you need to check. Number one, like I said earlier, is your thermostat. When you check the thermostat, if it is still intact, then go and check. Look for the leakages around every of the hose. Mind you, there are several hoses that takes water into the engine. So whenever there is leakage in any of these hoses, engine and water communication is meant to be pressurized. So now it is the engine that communicates with some of these sensors, so they know when to when to compress it and when it should be heated up. So it is both of them that communicate with each other. So whenever there is a leakage somewhere, probably a leakage of water, of course you will definitely experience overheating. Another one is when your fan does not blow in the direction where it should blow. If it should blow anti-clockwise and it's not going clockwise, definitely your vehicle will overheat. So your engine coolant temperature sensor will pick it as a fault somewhere. Why? Is because that is what is being there for. That is why is there to monitor. Like I told you, is an eye, is an eagle eye that is monitoring the movement of the water, the cooling system of that particular vehicle. So now it will pick it as a defect and send it back to where you will get the information. Why? Because the engine coolant temperature sensor is sending feedback to the ECU, which is your brain box, and your ECU will now interpret it and send it back to your dashboard, which is your instrument cluster. That is when you will see that my temperature gauge has gone up. Your temperature gauge cannot do anything without the help of this guy. So now another thing you need to check whenever you have checked some of these things and you feel that they are intact, you need to check whether your radiator itself is clogged. Probably it's dirty. There could be a blockage within the cell, radiator cell. So you need to check, or there's a leakage anywhere. So these are some of the things that you need to check, and that is basically the function of what we call engine coolant temperature sensor. Just as the name implies, engine coolant temperature sensor. So it's the one that is monitoring how your engine should be, the temperature of the engine. So now so far I have spoken about crankshaft position sensor. I told us the function of that particular one and how do you know whether it's faulty. So I told us about a camshaft position sensor. I told about oil switch sensor, that is, or oil level sensor, and engine coolant temperature sensor. So another sensor that is also within that area is what we call throttle position monitoring sensor. Throttle position monitoring sensor, especially for the modern day vehicles, they are equipped with this particular fixture. So now this particular fixture is the one that is sending signal that is taken when you rev your car from your pedal, okay, from the throttle to the throttle. It is the one that is sending signal into the ECU before your vehicle speak out to the level or to the voice that you want your vehicle to speak. So now that position monitoring sensor, that throttle position monitoring sensor, is being positioned there just as the name implies. So is placed there to monitor whether the throttle pedal is functioning well. Especially this thing is applicable to most of the vehicles that are designed to drive by wire. Drive by a wire are the electronic driven vehicles. That is vehicles that does not use manual cables, just like the manual cable, that is the one that use the manual cable, that is the iron cable. But the vehicles that are designed to use electric power cable. So those are the vehicles that this thing is designed for. And also we have TBS, throttle body sensor. Throttle body sensor, we have in every vehicle, we have what we call throttle mouth. So within the throttle mouth, you will see there are about 2 or 3 sensors depending on the design of the vehicle. So it is these sensors that are monitoring probably the amount of air that comes into your vehicle through when you rev, and the fuel that goes into that. So when you rev at times and your vehicle does not perform the way it should be, these are the areas that you need to check. So now we have what we call map sensor. Map sensor, that is manifold absolute pressure sensor. Map sensor is usually at the back of your manifold. Manifold are the something that design like silencer that usually is either in the front or the back, depending on the design of the vehicle. So it comes in the according to the number of the cylinder of the vehicle. Why? Because each particular hole goes to communicate with a particular cylinder. So there's a particular sensor that is sensing the air and the heat that is going through that particular component. So now whenever that guy is faulty, yes, you could rev your car, you could accelerate, and your vehicle misbehaves. So these are some of the things that you need to check when you are experiencing some of these difficulties. Because I am telling you all this afternoon because most of the vehicles that are designed within the 21st century, they are sensors driven vehicles, and some of these sensors, they have a very important role to play in the life of these vehicles. Otherwise you will damage the life of these vehicles. So now another sensor we have, just like what we have a IAT sensor. We have that is intake air temperature sensor. Intake air temperature sensor is a particular sensor that is monitoring the amount of air that goes into the engine, just like human being do takes oxygen in. Okay, so now remember I talked about MAP the other time, that is manifold absolute pressure. So now we have what we call intake air temperature sensor. So also we have the one that is monitoring the amount of air that goes out, which MAP also falls within that categories. So now sensor, the IAT sensor, so monitor the amount of air that goes into the engine. So because the engine is designed in such a way that as you are driving, you could see that the amount of air that blows towards an engine, a particular engine, is too enormous that if they are to be going into the engine, obviously the engine will not perform. So that is why this particular sensor is being designed to monitor the amount of air that goes into the engine, no matter the speed. Once the breeze kept on coming, it is the amount of air that this sensor allows to go into the engine that will go into the engine to go and perform. So these are some of the sensors, and so these are some of the sensors that we have around, and these are some of their functions. So now we need to speak further on some of these sensors, just like I've been talking on within the engine components area. So now we have, I want to move or proceed further to the transmission sensor, some of the sensors that we have around the transmission. Especially this is good for to some of us that we might be experiencing probably delay in gear shifting, or surging, or accurate or epileptic gear transition, or transmission gear transition. So now is very good for us, and I want us to be attentive to some of these things. And before I speak further, I will before I speak further, I would like to quickly go on a short break. When I come back, we will continue. Stay with us. 4 minutes. You're welcome back. So before we went on that short break, I've taught us some of the sensors that we have around the engine component area. So now we'll be dwelling more on. I'll be talking on the transmission sensors, the sensors that we have around the gear, that is the transmission. So number one, we have what we call uh, gear temperature monitoring sensor. Gear temperature monitoring sensor. Now, just like we have a engine coolant temperature monitoring sensor for the engine, so we have a particular sensor that is monitoring the hotness of every transmission. Why? Because the temperature should be normal, should be within a particular recommended requirement. So when your gear overheated, it could damage the gear. Remember, we are talking of iron, that is components that are clustering together, so that are moving together. So when there is too much heat, friction sets in, and it begins to what? There over time there will be distorts. There will be distorts within the gear component area, which will later wear your gear. So that is why the gear temperature monitoring sensor is very, very necessary in all the automatic automatic transmission. So now, so that is the function of that particular one. And also we have what we call shift solenoids. Shift solenoids are the sensors that are monitoring the way your car gear is shifting from, let's say, from gear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or to whatever number of transmission vehicles you might be driving. So now every gear that is from 1 to 4 or 5 or whatever the number has its own sensor that is responsible for it, that is giving account of that particular gear number to the ECU. So they have what we call the gear switch. We call them shift solenoid. So they are the solenoid that are monitoring that particular movement of the gear, the shifting of the gear. So then also we have what we call VSS. VSS basically mean vehicle speed sensor. Remember, I talked about shift solenoid. Shift solenoid, like I said, that it is responsible for the shifting of the gear. So also, while your gear shifts, we have vehicle speed sensor. Vehicle speed sensor has to do with the it has to communicate within the gear and the vehicle legs, so that your vehicle can move. So it is something, when your gear shift well, that is what it will give the speed to your vehicle. So that is why you usually see that when your vehicle starts counting from gear 1, is on a is either, it depends on how hard you press the accelerator. So it moves on a very low pace, then increase when it gets to 2, increase again when it gets to 3, increase again when it gets to 4, and on and on and on and on, like that. So now it is the vehicle speed sensor that is monitoring that particular speed. So why both of them are communicating, that is your shift solenoid and your VSS, which is your vehicle speed sensor, are communicating with each other. So also we have what we call a wheel speed sensor. Wheel speed sensor also communicate. They take information from them. So that has to do with the wheel. So whenever there is miscommunication with the wheel, it will send a signal to the end, to the ECU, to the brain box, and let us know that something is not right here. Also, we have what we call ABS. We have ABS, that is anti-lock braking system. ABS is a sensor that is monitoring your braking system. So it's a sensor that is responsible for the function of your braking system, especially for the vehicle that is designed to work with a braking system. But because of our time, I might not be able to dwell more on some of these things. Also, we have what we call tire monitoring pressure sensor, tire pressure monitoring sensor. We have what we call crash sensor, such as airbag, seat belt, and so on and so forth. So this is where we'll be draw the curtain on today's program, and based on everything that we have said earlier today, if you have any information in respect to some of these that we have shared, or you have question as regards to your vehicle, or you have any observation, kindly let us know by reaching out to us on the following telephone numbers, that is +234 +234 70 53 70 50 15, or +234 70 8207 30 60. It's been a wonderful having you people all over and around the world today once again. So see you next time. Enjoy your day and enjoy your ride. Thank you. Bye.